Of the fantasy football season, and here's a few defense DST units I have as sleeper options this week. The first one, the Washington Commanders. So right here, Washington Commanders, not the greatest of matchups at Detroit, because this Detroit offense, they actually play tough football, and if they're down in the ball game, try to fight their way back into it like we saw last week. They were down big to the Philadelphia Eagles, but they only lost 38-35, and they put up a lot of points. So last week versus the Jaguars, the Commanders here, 22 points allowed, 2 sacks and an into. And right now, I think this ball game could be mid-20s or even in the 30s between the Commanders here in Detroit. They're on the fast track over there in Detroit. But I think this Commander team can make a few plays, but only in deeper leagues, obviously. I would recommend them as a sleeper option. Right now, available in 92% of fantasy leagues. So if you're in a pinch for a defense, I think the Commanders could be a mediocre option this week as a sleeper option. The next defense, the New York Giants. So the Giants, they got a decent matchup here in their home opener at MetLife Stadium in Week 2 versus the Carolina Panthers. And we know Baker Mayfield, he's good for maybe a turnover or 2 per game. So last week the Giants came back and they won that one, beating Tennessee Titans in Tennessee. And then that one, 20 points allowed, a sack and a fumble recovery. So right here, I think they could get a few turnovers, think a few sacks in this game. And this ball game, I think, could be anywhere from mid-teens to high 20s between the Panthers and the Giants. In my opinion, these two teams are pretty similar in ways. So right now, Giants available is their DST in 95% of fantasy leagues. And if you really want to go deep in the waiver wire and put a team's defense DST unit in your starting lineup, that's what you could do with the Giants. But it wouldn't surprise me if they score anywhere from 6 to 10 fantasy points in this one. And the third and final DST defense I have as sleeper options, the Seattle Seahawks. So the Seahawks, a nice Week 1 victory versus the Denver Broncos, with Russell Wilson returning to Seattle. And the crowd was great there, no doubt about it. And the defense, 16 points allowed, 2 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries in this one. And right here, they got a divisional matchup versus the San Francisco 49ers in San Francisco. So San Francisco, I know they struggled in Week 1 in a ball game where the conditions were just so poor with the rain over there in Soldier Field. It was like a swimming pool, and Trey Lance, he didn't look great. He took some big hits in that game. But the Seattle defense, they took a big blow losing Jamal Adams for the season with a torn quad. But I think here versus the San Francisco team, they can make a few plays in this one. I think this could be a closer game than what the spread is saying right now, with San Francisco big favorites in this ball game. But it's a divisional game. Seattle's defense looked decent in Week 1, even though I know Russell Wilson had over 300 yards passing in that ball game. But for the most part, they were pretty good versus the run. And I think in this one, they're going to make it tough for Trey Lance a little bit in this. Trey Lance, a lot of people have anointed him a big-time quarterback, but right now he still has to prove it. And, you know, Pete Carroll and this defense, they're going to try to come out and play a good ball game in San Francisco. So as a sleeper option, I think they're decent, but obviously they didn't crack my top 12 this week here, Seattle, in the rankings at defense. If you didn't see that video out as well, it's up on the channel. Check it. And they're available in 98% of fantasy leagues. That's a few defense DST units I have as sleeper options this week in Week 2 of the fantasy football season.